Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Based on a story by Oscar Wilde, I love this one and saved it for Friday. It is called The Happy Prince. In it, we see the depth of Christ's love for us. High above the city on a tall column stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed in his sword hilt. He was very much admired. The town councilors thought the Happy Prince brought honor to their city, and the small children said that he looked just like an angel, though none of them had ever seen an angel. Parents pointed to the Happy Prince with pride and urged their children to be content and peaceful like the beautiful statue. One night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had been delayed. When he arrived in the city, he immediately began to search for a proper place to stay. When he spotted the statue on the tall column, he decided to sleep between the feet of the Happy Prince. Just as he prepared to go to sleep by putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. "What a curious thing!" he cried. "There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining. The climate in the north of Europe is really dreadful." Then another drop fell, and a third. Just as the swallow decided to move to a drier location, he looked up to see tears running down the golden cheeks of the Happy Prince. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with pity. "Who are you?" he said. "I am the Happy Prince." "Why are you weeping, then?" asked the swallow. "When I was alive, I had a human heart," answered the statue. "I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace Sanssouci, where sorrow is not allowed to enter. In the daytime I played with my companions in the garden, and in the evening I led the dance in the great hall. Around the garden ran a lofty wall, but I never cared to ask what lay beyond it. Everything about me was so beautiful. My courtiers called me the Happy Prince, and happy indeed I was, if pleasure be happiness. So I lived and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have set me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and the misery of my city, and though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep." "What? Is he not solid gold?" the swallow thought. He was too polite to make any personal remarks out loud. "Far away," continued the statue in a low musical voice, "far away in a little street there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has coarse red hands, all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. In a bed in the corner of the room her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking for oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water, so he is crying. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move." "My friends are waiting for me in Egypt," said the swallow. "At present they are flying up and down the Nile, but soon they will go to sleep in the tomb of the great king. The king is wrapped in yellow linen, lying in his coffin, embalmed with spices." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The boy is so thirsty, and the mother is so sad." "I don't think I like boys," answered the swallow. "Last summer the miller's two rude sons threw stones at me. Of course they never hit me. Swallows fly too well for that. But still it was a mark of disrespect." But the Happy Prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. "It is very cold here, but I will stay with you for one night and be your messenger," he said. "Thank you, little swallow," said the prince. So the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak over the roofs of the town. He passed over the cathedral tower where the white marble angels were sculpted. He passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. He passed over the river and saw the lanterns hanging from the masts of the ships. At last he came to a poor house and looked in. The boy was tossing feverishly on his bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. In he hopped, and he laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings. "How cool I feel," murmured the boy. "I must be getting better." Then he sank into a delicious slumber. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. "It is curious," he remarked, "but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold." "That is because you have done a good action," said the prince. And the little swallow began to think, and then he fell asleep. When day broke, the swallow flew down to the river and had a bath. People were surprised to see a swallow in winter. He flew all about the town for one last look before he headed south to Egypt. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. "Have you any commissions for Egypt?" he cried. "I am just starting." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me one night longer?" "My friends, wait for me in Egypt," protested the little swallow. Far away across the city, I see a young man in a tiny attic apartment. He is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in a tumbler by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. His hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are as red as pomegranate. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but he is too cold to write any more. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint. "I will wait with you one night longer," said the swallow, who really had a good heart. "Shall I take another ruby?" "Alas, I have no ruby now," said the prince. "My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago. Pluck out one of them and take it to him. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood to finish his play." "Dear prince," said the swallow, "I cannot do that." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "do as I command you." So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew away to the student's apartment. It was easy enough to get in, as there was a hole in the roof. Through this he darted and came into the room. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. When he looked up, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. "This is a gift from a great admirer," cried the student. "Now I can finish my play." The next day the swallow flew down to the harbor. He sat on the mast of a large vessel and shouted, "I am going to Egypt." No one seemed to notice, and when the moon was full, he flew back to the happy prince. "I have come to bid you goodbye," he cried. "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "will you not stay with me one night longer?" "It is winter," answered the swallow, "and the snow will soon be here. In Egypt it is warm, and my companions are building a nest in the temple of Baalbec. I must leave you now, but I will never forget you, and next spring I will bring you back 2 beautiful jewels in place of those you have given away. The ruby shall be redder than a red rose, and the sapphire shall be as blue as the great sea." "In the square below," said the happy prince, "there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money, and she is crying. She has not shoes or stockings, and her little head is bare. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her." "I will stay with you one night longer," said the swallow, "but I cannot pluck out your eye. You would be quite blind then." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "do as I command you." So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. "What a lovely bit of glass!" cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing. Then the swallow came back to the prince. "You are blind now, so I will stay with you always." "No, little swallow," said the poor prince. "You must go away to Egypt." "I will stay with you always," said the swallow, and he slept at the prince's feet. All the next day he sat on the prince's shoulder and told him stories of what he had seen in strange lands. He told him of the Sphinx, who is as old as the world itself, and of the merchant who walks slowly by the side of their camels, carrying amber beads in their hands. He told him of green snakes and red ibises and gold fish. "Dear little swallow," said the prince, "you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there." So the swallow flew over the great city and saw beggars sitting at the gates of palaces and starving children looking listlessly at the black streets. Then he flew back to the prince and told the prince what he had seen. "I am covered with fine gold," said the prince. "You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to my poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy." Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off, till the happy prince looked quite dull and gray. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the streets. "We have bread now," they cried. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. The streets were so bright and glistening that they looked as if they were made of silver. Long icicles like crystal daggers hung down from the eaves of the houses. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince he loved so well. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. But at last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. "Goodbye, dear prince," he murmured. "Will you let me kiss your hand?" "I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow," said the prince. "You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you." "It is not to Egypt I am going," said the swallow. "I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not?" And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. At that moment a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right in two. Early the next morning, the mayor and the town councilman were walking in the town square. As they passed the column, they looked up at the statue. "Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks," the mayor said. "The ruby has fallen out of his sword, and the eyes are gone, and he is no longer golden. He looks little better than a beggar." "Little better than a beggar," the town councilors agreed. "And there is a dead bird at his feet," the mayor continued. "It is disgusting." The town councilors pulled down the statue of the happy prince and ordered it to be melted down at the foundry. Several days later, the foreman at the foundry reported that though the furnace was very hot, it was not able to melt the broken lead heart. "We must throw it away," he said. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. "Bring me the two most precious things in the city," said God to one of his angels. The angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. "You have rightly chosen," said God, "for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forevermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me. Thank you, God, for Jesus' sacrificial love. As we see the needs of others, may we live in that kind of love. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.